come speak with us?
You know what? We're going to have plenty more opportunities this evening. And,
Warren Buffett.
He's a busy man. You know, he's got
owner
he's got
of newspapers, among many other things, of course.
And we'll have to find out later what he thinks about tax reform. But I think we have Bob Odenkirk is speaking to some people near us. We'll talk to him in just a second. Also known as Saul of Better Call Saul, and he plays in this movie. Let's see, what's his name? Ben Bagdikian, who was actually the journalist who received the papers from Daniel Ellsberg. And you actually interviewed Daniel Ellsberg, famous Pentagon Papers leaker, recently. Tell us what that was like.
We're going to have that interview live next week. Daniel Ellsberg is expected to be here tonight. He's in his 80s. He's the one who was behind the Pentagon Papers leak, and he considered it to be his patriotic duty to share the information that was in the Pentagon Papers. We are talking thousands and thousands of pages. There was no one bombshell item in the Pentagon Papers. Instead, it was this mass study looking at American involvement and assessment of Vietnam and that part of the world, and basically saying that we were in a losing battle and it was all for naught. And so getting that information out changed the course not only of the Vietnam War, but also the Nixon presidency, Hannah.
So you said, the Pentagon Papers, what they really revealed was a history over multiple administrations of presidents lying about progress in Vietnam. And so this movie is about the decision of the executive editor and the publisher of the Washington Post deciding whether or not to publish the Pentagon Papers in spite of a court injunction, also known as it was an injunction in the end.
Yeah, they were
enjoined, injunction, same thing, it turns out.
And the New York Times was the initial publisher of this, but once they were enjoined, the Post had to make the decision if they would step into this fray and also publish the Pentagon Papers. And then after they were enjoined, Daniel Ellsberg ended up giving the Pentagon Papers to a whole bunch of other media outlets.
You said there was over a dozen, wasn't
it?
Mm-hmm. And it was the Post that decided to take that risk and to,
And at the heart of this movie is the relationship between Katharine Graham, known as Mrs. Graham, to those of us who work at the
we're going to be referring
Post,
to her as Mrs. Graham throughout the evening.
Out of great respect, and also Ben Bradley, played by Tom
Hanks, in fact. And what's interesting about this movie is that Steven Spielberg actually made this entire film in about 9 months, I believe. And he saw the script by Liz Hannah, wrote the original script, who was a sort of young unknown writer, and within weeks it was in the hands of a producer, in the hands of Steven Spielberg, and he decided to make the movie. She wrote it before the presidential election in 2016, but they shot the whole thing with great urgency, which we hopefully will get to ask Steven Spielberg about tonight, why that film had to be shot in his mind in a matter of months.
And we're here at the premiere at the Museum in Washington, D.C. This is everyone's first glimpse at this movie, and so we have all sorts of notable dignitaries from the Washington area. We're expecting some senators to be here, as well as the actors in the movie, Steven Spielberg, of course, and people who are portrayed in the movie, like Daniel Ellsberg.
Yeah, and the members of the Graham family. We saw Lally Graham go by before, who was Mrs. Graham's daughter and a journalist in her own right, and she gets to see her family portrayed in what is sure to be a blockbuster. We already have many Oscar nominations in the bag for this film, including the best screenplay by Liz Hannah, and in conjunction with Josh Singer, the two writers who did this together. And we're hoping to talk to them shortly as well.
We see Daniel Ellsberg is here. You can see him right over there.
Aha!
Having a moment.
Looking sprightly. Here he comes. How fascinating it must be for someone who was a pariah for so long in the eyes of the government to get to walk a red carpet and see his decision in life being portrayed in a huge movie.
Yeah, he was actually put on trial, Hannah, and he faced 12 felony counts and a possible sentence of 115 years. Mr. Ellsberg. Hi, will you come talk to us for a moment? Hi. Dan, it's Libby from the Washington Post. It's so good to see you. Thank you so much. We just wanted to know what it's like to be here tonight. This must be your wife.
I'm Patricia, yes.
Patricia, thank you.
Copied the Pentagon Papers, and my daughter, who copied the Pentagon Papers when she was 10. Got cut out of the film.
So nice to see you. Thank you for being here. How does it feel to be here tonight?
I'm sorry?
How does it feel to be here tonight?
Very good. I'm very glad to be able to present my daughter here because she helped me copy the Pentagon Papers.
Now, how old were
She
you?
was 10.
Yeah, so and you remember this?
Oh, yeah.
Did you know what your dad was up to?
He told us that he was trying to stop the war and that he expected to spend the rest of his life in jail.
Dan, you've talked about how you wanted to show your kids the example of why you were doing this in case you did have to spend the rest of your life in jail, that they would have some sort of understanding about what this meant for you.
She was doing it with me and her brother, who was then 13, because I expected to be in prison very shortly. I thought they would come out soon, which they didn't, and that I would only see them behind thick glass from then on. So I wanted them to see that what I was doing was, I thought, the right thing to do, and that I hadn't gone crazy, as people would say, that I hadn't become, that this was the right thing to do, and I wanted them to have it in the back of their minds that they might have to do something like this in their life, which, in fact, my daughter has done, and my son.
When I interviewed you recently, you told me that a lot of marriages fail when people come forward and put their lives and their freedom on the line in acts like this. How were you guys able to work through that?
Well, it was our first year of marriage and we put out the papers, and it was a very bonding experience and a deep and profound privilege to be part of something so powerful for peace.
So what are you hoping to see from this movie tonight?
Oh, the importance of the press, and it's so relevant now, because this is the true news, not the fake news.
I hope this will be shown in the White House with Jeff Sessions by Donald Trump, because it really shows a feud between a president and the Washington Post specifically, and the free press. And I have no doubt that Donald Trump intends to wage a war against the free press. So this movie, I think, will perhaps give him caution. That would be very good. And if not, it'll inspire other people to tell the truth.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ellsberg, for talking with us. Thank you to all of you. Enjoy the movie. Thanks.
So what he mentioned there was that his daughter helped him at age 10, which is incredible, to, I believe, cut off the part of the Pentagon Papers that said that it was top secret, which, to be quite honest, I don't know if that counts. I don't know if that effectively declassifies information.
Yeah, then you're free to give it out to the press.
Yeah, but how fun that she gets to be here tonight.
And of course, remember back in the day when he was taking these and copying them, it was page by page. There was no collating that happened. Obviously,
there was no Google Docs.
Right, exactly. And Daniel Ellsberg is not slowing down in his 80s. He has a brand new book out called The Doomsday Machine. And it turns out when he took the Pentagon Papers, he also took documents related to nuclear war and what would happen in the event of a first strike. And that is what he talks about in his brand new book.
We're ready for Bob. Better call Bob.
As you can see, it's a mix of celebrities as well as folks in journalism and people involved in the movie.
This is how the sausage is made, guys.
This is the red carpet.
The rough and
There's Jeff
tumble of
Bezos
the red.
walking by.
There he goes. The owner of the Washington Post, who actually purchased the Washington Post from the Graham family. And he's in a hurry to see this movie, so he just ran down this carpet on his way.
Fun. It was so much fun. I mean, look, we had a cast with Carrie Coon, David Frost, Pat Healy, Matthew Reese. Oh my God, just so many fun people. And we just were joking around and talking about movies. And of course, Steven, he can reference any movie of the last 100 years. And it was just a great time. All right, thanks.
Hello, Bob. We're live on the Washington Post website.
Very intimidating.
Extremely. This is all here for us, as you can see. It says
Holy
the Post.
cow.
So, did you actually get to tour the Washington Post offices at any point while?
Today we did a little event there, but I didn't get to tour the offices. Some of the other actors did, and Steven did, of course.
Well, come by and we'll give you a tour.
Really? Okay.
Absolutely.
Will you tell us about the man you play?
Ben Bagdickian, yeah. I play a man named Ben Bagdickian, a real man who lived, a great guy. You can read about him on Wikipedia, and you can read his autobiography, which is a great one. And if you're interested in journalism and you're a young person, I highly recommend you check out Ben's autobiography. And he also wrote a book I believe, called The Media Monopoly, about the conglomerate takeover of news and his concerns about that. It's still a concern.
Well,
and,
I was going to say, what do you think about the Disney and Fox?
I think it's one of those things that feels very uncertain and massive, but what it actually means, I don't know. I mean, it's just a big shakeout that has to happen.
I have to ask you one follow-up question about how do you portray a journalist? Because we are used to seeing Hollywood have to dress down a little bit, have to schlub it up a little to be one of us.
I hope you don't mind I schlubbed it up. I feel like Ben was a guy who was about the nitty-gritty and not about a show. And in fact, in his autobiography, he writes about blending in as a journalist. And of course, everyone can approach this job differently, but for him, that was a theory that he adopted early on, which is a good journalist blends in and allows the story to happen in front of them and just records it. So I kind of got a little proceeded into the background, sloppy clothing, a little bit low-key, not intimidating. That's who Ben was when he was chasing a story. He was a real character and a strong person. He just diminished it when he was on the job. So that's what I did.
Would Saul approve of releasing the Pentagon Papers?
Depends which side he was on. There's a legal suit either way. He's into it.
He makes his money either way.
Yeah, he makes his money.
Thank you. So there's actually Ben Badikian has an amazing scene in this movie with Bob, who we just saw, where he transports the Pentagon Papers, I believe, on a seat on a plane in their own box. Because it was a large box, a lot of papers, as we know. Who else have we got coming along?
All this information is so at our fingertips nowadays when we're just taking it in. But a journalist has to find that information. They have to find those sources. And it's a very time-consuming effort. I did. I read the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Chicago Tribune, the Guardian, and check out a few other papers.
So we are here still at the premiere of The Post, a new film by Steven Spielberg starring Tom Hanks, Meryl Streep, and a huge cast of characters.
Hi, Senator Leahy. How are you? Washington Post. So good to see you. So why are you here tonight?
Well, both Marcel and I remember this so well. See, I was a prosecutor at the time back in Vermont, but I'd gone to law school here. I knew all the locations, but then as a prosecutor, I started reading this and following it, and it was amazing. I saw a couple of clips on of the movie. We both knew Ben Bradley and Catherine Graham very well. In fact, one of the clips we saw was in her drawing room, and both Marcel and I had been there chatting with her and others. And, I thought it was pretty amazing.
Very realistic.
Well, the little bit I saw was that Spielberg is doing is going to be realistic.
Do you think this should be required viewing, or should general viewing for senators or leaders in politics? Daniel Ellsberg was here, and he said he wished the White House would screen it.
I don't know if they read things as history, but no, it should be. We have too many members of Congress who don't recall history, recall it thoroughly enough. I mean, Ken Burns' series on Vietnam was an eye-opener to a lot of people. I suspect this will be too.
Thank you, Senator. Good to see you.
More people coming down nearly with us are Bruce Greenwood and Bradley Whitford, who play Robert McNamara and Arthur Parsons, respectively, who was on the board of the Post, I believe. What did the senator have to say?
Well, it's an interesting moment to hear senators like Senator Leahy talk about this, because as he was saying, he and his son remember this era. He and his son remember when this happened in the 1970s. And, you know, when I was talking to Daniel Ellsberg a little while ago, he feels like releasing the Pentagon Papers was an act of patriotism, but of course at the time there were very different viewpoints about that. And, you know, that's the impetus for this movie. It's not the focus of this movie, though. But that action is what put into motion everything that comes afterwards.
And in fact, free press would be a very different institution today if it weren't for the Supreme Court decision, 6-3 decision, I believe, that said that the Post was able to publish the Pentagon Papers because they did not see that there was a threat to national security, which was the argument of the government, which really set the stage for our modern free press.
It's not every day that Washington gets to do the red carpet Hollywood premiere, so you see a lot of the stars of the movie coming down the red carpet here, and they may be asked a little bit wonkier questions than they're used to in Hollywood.
We have David Cross and, excitingly, Sarah Paulson, who I personally loved in the O.J. miniseries. She played Marcia Clark in that.
And Amber Tamblyn is right up here
Amber
as well.
Tamblyn, who is ducking away, doing a runner. And the producer, Amy Pascal, we also see further down. We're hoping to talk to David Cross in just a minute. Perhaps best known for his role in Arrested Development. It's my favorite role. I won't ask him about any costume decisions that fans of that show will be wondering about. And let's see. This was a really incredible feat to be pulled off, and is a big testament to Steven Spielberg as a powerhouse of Hollywood to be able to not only pull off a movie this quickly, but to assemble a cast that is quite incredible at very short notice.
Obviously, they were able to get this out before awards season closed for
Yes.
2017, and it's already gotten awards attention, Hannah.
It has, I believe, the second highest number of Oscar nominations. Golden Globe nominations. And the limited release is December 22nd, and then there's a wider release.
We would love to talk. Yeah, wonderful. Hi.
Hi.
We're the other Post. We're the Washington Post. It's so nice to see you both. Thanks so much for talking with us.
Love that.
Will you tell us a little bit about how you came across this project? Because I believe you were the one who received the script.
Yes, a wonderful writer named Liz Hanna, who is right down there. I think you'll see her in a bit. She wrote this script. She's read Kay's biography. She was completely motivated and fell in love with the character. She sat down at her kitchen table and wrote it and went to look for an agent. And somebody in my office was lucky. I was lucky enough that a very unimpressive young man named Ben stole it off someone's desk and gave it to me.
I mean, it's like a screenwriter's dream, basically.
Absolutely. I think it probably is. And it was our dream, too.
What is it about the journalism story that is so compelling right now? What gave you both buy into this project?
I think that the movie business has a long history of making films about celebrating people who tell the truth. And I think it's in that tradition. I think that's why we were so proud to make it.
I mean, you've produced so many movies. What stands out about this one?
Go ahead, Ben.
I mean, I love the relationship between Ben and Kay. I think their relationship is a love relationship. I think they really admire each other and that they had a great rapport with one another and really respected each other. And you don't see that every day in male-female relationships.
What can we learn from that kind of a professional working relationship in this Me Too moment?
That men and women can work together.
And it's the only kind of relationship to have.
Yes.
That's great advice.
They can respect each other. It was a mutual respect and a love, and that's what it should all be like.
What do you make of the merger today of Disney and Fox?
Lucky for them all.
Any words of encouragement?
For the world?
What is your Christmas wish this year?
Oh, wow. My Christmas wish I already got.
Which was her son getting into college, into Harvard.
Congratulations.
That was my Christmas wish. That came true. Equality for everyone.
Yeah, perfect. Couldn't have said it better.
This is a movie, obviously, with a female protagonist, Meryl Streep portraying Katharine Graham. Do you think that there's a need for more such films addressing?
Oh, baby, you know there is.
Do you have more in the pipeline?
We are going to keep making them. Oh, yes.
What's next?
What's next for me is the sequel to The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
We have Ready Player One coming out March 30th, 2018.
And will you tell us about the urgency with which this film was made? Because it was turned around in an incredibly short amount of time.
Well, it seemed like a pretty relevant subject. I think it became more relevant as we were making the film. I think the movie stands up completely on its own, regardless of what's happening in the news, but every day it seems to matter more.
What do you think is the biggest threat to press freedom and free speech today?
Ignorance. Thank you.
Thank you for speaking with us.
Thank you.
Let's see. So that was Amy Pascal, who is a executive producer on this project. She's the one who apparently one of her people at her production company snagged that script right off someone's desk, and she's the one who sent it to Steven Spielberg and has made this incredible film.
And also Christy McCaskill-Krieger, another producer on this film.
Yes.
And if you look up her producer credits, they're like so many producer credits. I don't know how someone's been involved in so many noteworthy films over the course of a career. So interesting to hear their insights into this dynamic of the Ben Bradley, Mrs. Graham relationship.
We're going to try and snag a moment with David Cross here. Currently telling CBS about something that's bleak. I assume he means heartbroken. We'll get him in a moment. Very famous man, and who everyone wants to speak to. Hello.
Carrie Coon and Tracy Letts together.
Okay.
As you know,
The Washington Post.
I'm going to let you.
Hi.
Hello.
We're the Washington Post.
Yep.
We're the Washington Post. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Okay, what are we expecting from this movie? What does it say in this modern climate?
In this particular climate, I actually think the message in this movie was, written not in this particular political climate. I think the message, the fundamental message of this movie, to me, it is that you don't get a democracy. You got to make it every day, and you need to be vigilant. And for all you people at the Washington Post, freedom of the press is the First Amendment. The Founding Fathers were very concerned about this. It wasn't 5, it wasn't 7. It's the First Amendment. And in order for this democracy to function, we need to make sure we're not delegitimizing the press and the idea of truth. But there will always be conflict. But the only way this democracy works is with a strong press.
Bradley Whitford, what do you have to say to people who cannot stop streaming and rewatching The West Wing?
Keep going. I got kids going to college.
There's a lot of people here in D.C. who watch it a lot.
By the way, you don't have to be there when it's on. Just push the button. No, it's.
Let's get in those royalties, people.
Why is it still so popular all these years later? I literally know people who will go home and comfort watch The West Wing.
Yeah, it's like progressive porn. It's reassuring to people. Look, I think that show is similarly patriotic message about the perils and the possibilities of democracy. And the interesting thing, and the thing that ties Aaron Sorkin and Spielberg with this material only works not if you have somebody. Aaron and Steven don't want to serve any civic vegetables. They are impatient showmen. And when that collides with the real stakes of politics, which is politics of the way we create our moral vision, and when you get a real showman riding that horse, it's a good ride. It's a bad metaphor, but it's a great ride.
We wish we could have done a walk and talk with you, but unfortunately we're penned in. We know you're used to that. Like the only way you know how to really communicate. Why do you think you find yourself playing so many gentlemen of Washington D.C.?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, West Wing was easy because that was like that character, Josh Lemon's political point of view was exactly my political point of view.
And what about Arthur Parsons, who you play in this film?
No,
Tell us about him.
it's not. Arthur Parsons is not a human being who existed.
No wonder I couldn't find him in my research. This is a great relief.
He's a kind of composite of the very legitimate business interests that were at stake that allowed the Washington Post to survive. And Kay is making a very dangerous decision here, and I'm reminding her of the risks.
So are you the bad guy? Is that what you're saying?
I'm a defensible bad guy.
You're a reason. You're the dad. You're the like. Let's settle down. Let's not do anything we're regretting.
Yeah. Let's not throw everything out.
Thank you very much for sticking to it.
Thanks so much.
Arthur Parsons, not a real man, but a symbolism of financial stakes. And actually, what he's referring to is the fact that the Post was about to do its initial public offering. I believe in like the week before these papers landed on their desk, and they had to take this risky move. And there's a lot of implications for investors and potential investors if you are currently being yelled at by the government. So this was a lot of the tension. Yes, please. Here we have Bruce Greenwood, who plays Robert McNamara.
Hi.
Tell us a little bit at the Post about this movie and what it was like to make.
Well, to be in a movie that talks about this subject matter at this critical moment in our history was something that you very rarely get a chance to be part of.
And this movie was made incredibly quickly and with a great deal of urgency. And it's also a movie about a looming threat to the press and to free speech. What do you think in 2017 is the biggest threat to the press and to free speech?
I think the biggest threat to the press now is this very insidious way of discrediting anything that seems to have any resonance or truth to it.
How so?
We as a people are entitled to the truth, right?
Sorry?
We as a people are entitled to the truth.
And how can people get truth that they can trust?
Well, yeah, that's the question. How can people get information and trust it? And if the information that's coming across every channel that we trust is being impugned and maligned and discredited and mocked, you do that long enough, eventually people may throw up their hands, and democracy is a very fragile bubble.
Some say it dies in darkness.
Yeah, and that's, hopefully we can go a little ways towards reminding people that we can't be silent and we have to push back.
Will you tell us a little bit about the relationship between Mrs. Graham of the Post and Robert McNamara?
They've been friends a very long time.
So this is a point of tension in the film, isn't it? That she, what was McNamara's advice to her about the Pentagon Papers?
Well, I think originally, when the Times was publishing it, they talked to McNamara and he helped them word a rebuttal to the injunction that had been slapped on them by the Nixon administration. Although personally he probably didn't want it to come out in that moment in that way, he understood its value.
And what do you hope that people who see this film will take away from it and learn? And how will it change people's lives, do you think?
Well, I hope they take away that democracy is incredibly fragile, and it hangs in the balance sometimes whether we can believe what we see on the news, whether we can believe what we read. And if there comes a time when we can't believe what we read, then it's chaos.
I heard that Steven Spielberg doesn't let you rehearse. Is that really unnerving, or is it great?
No, that's not entirely true.
Okay, I've read that in Anchor then.
No, we'd run through it a couple times and figure stuff out and try different things. I didn't find that.
It's something he said elsewhere.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for speaking to us.
We're live at the Washington Post.
Great.
Yeah.
I have the screenwriters.
Fantastic.
Oh, great.
Awesome. Great.
Singer and
Great.
right there, so they'll come over.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks so much. So you're seeing the behind-the-scenes part of the red carpet as well. How folks will let us know who's walking the red carpet, who we can talk to. I'm Libby Casey. I'm with Hannah Jewell. We're both video hosts at the Washington Post, and obviously we're here for the premiere of The Post at the museum.
We're Post at the Post premiere, and we're the Post. And we're about to speak to the screenwriters.
Hi.
Or perhaps Matthew Rhys. Perfect. We've been wanting to speak to Matthew Rhys.
We're the Washington Post.
The real deal.
The real deal. Thank you so much for being here.
Not at all.
So,
what's the reaction in the Post?
Well, we haven't seen the movie yet, so.
People are surprisingly chill about it, though. We know that some of the stars were in the building today, and it was just business as usual.
Business as usual.
Well, of course. I mean, this isn't anything new for the Post. You've been sort of dealing with, you know, you've had your own rock stars and superstars from the 70s. So those on screen aren't anything new to you, surely.
So you play Daniel Ellsberg, who we had the privilege of talking to just a little while ago. He's here. Yes, he's here. Yep, with his wife and his daughter. So you were able to do some research before taking on this role.
I was incredibly fortunate to spend time with Daniel, and you realize how rare it is as an actor to kind of have the map of what you're doing, albeit very short in my, for what I do in the movie, but to ask the person you're playing, what were you feeling at this moment? What were you doing at this moment? And then, so at every point, you just asked him what was going on for him. So it was a rare treat.
So I'm a fan of The Americans. So there's a thread of patriotism that runs through your roles, although it's a bit of a subversive patriotism, one might say.
Yeah, yes. You're right, it's patriotism. How you view it is to the discretion of the viewer.
Do you see these shows as having anything in common, the Post movie and the show The Americans?
Yes, they're great parallels and similarities. As you say, sort of patriotism, the passion for patriotism is high up.
You mentioned you play a Russian secret agent in The Americans.
Yes, who has a great love of country, like Daniel. I'm trying to think, is that where it begins and ends? No, they do share, similarities.
Has The Americans become increasingly relevant in this moment where U.S.-Russia relations are a big focus? Not just, of course, how the U.S. views Russia, but U.S. Concerns about Russian meddling in the election, so on and so forth.
Well, our creator, Joe Ellsberg, is a former CIA operative, so he had a lot of intelligence many years before, so that's why he went about writing this series, so it would come out at the right time. I'm joking. Yes, it was a complete...
I was right there with you.
It was a complete coincidence.
We journalists take things very seriously.
I know.
This could be on the front page of the paper.
Who knew? They knew. What I enjoyed was, especially from a number of journalists in the first season, were like, is Russian interest relevant anymore? And we were like, we don't know, but it makes good drama. And now we're going, haha, we told you so.
So as you mentioned, Daniel Ellsberg's appearance in this movie is brief, albeit pivotal.
Absolutely. I mean, you wouldn't have a movie without him. You wouldn't have this slice of history without him and his incredibly brave act.
Fascinating that he is here for this. He's still alive. He's in his 80s. He's obviously been profiled before, the documentary, The Most Dangerous Man in America. But is it important for you to be able to know that he can witness this and be present for this?
Absolutely. And I think, and I'm ashamed to say, it was a part of history that I was completely unaware of. So the greater the spotlight that's shed on this moment in history, as thanks to him, I think so much so the better.
Thanks so much for talking with us. Take care.
Or actually, can we... All right. We have just snagged Liz Hanna and Josh Singer, who are the screenwriters of this movie. We are the Washington Post.
Hi. Is that a newspaper?
It's a real newspaper, a little operation out of Washington, D.C. you might have heard of. Yes.
And a video operation.
And a video operation, hence us being here today. So I want to start by asking you, Liz Hanna, you wrote this script on spec, didn't you? And now you're nominated for a Golden Globe?
It's a very weird year. Yeah. At some moment I'll wake up and realize it was all a very, very wonderful dream.
Honestly, I would love to have that dream. Can you have any, do you have any advice for young writers, first of all, who might want to suddenly be nominated for a Golden Globe?
Keep writing, constantly write, and write about what you care about. This was the story of Kay Graham, and the story of her finding her voice was something I was super passionate about. And I think if you're passionate about something, chances are there's somebody else in the world that's passionate about it. I was lucky that it was also him and Stephen and Tom and Meryl and Amy and Christy, and so just find your tribe and keep going.
Do you think that Mrs. Graham, as we are told to refer to her as at the Post, do you think she's been somewhat...
we also all get that book when
we also
start?
When you started the Washington
Your
Post,
very
you
first
get
day
a
at the
copy
Washington
of
Post, you get a
personal
copy of
history,
the book.
Pulitzer Prize-winning book about, which is really honestly the best way to understand the Post for the first time. I'm quite new at the Post, and I was turning the pages being like, oh, that's what the meeting rooms are named for, and so on. Will you tell us, do you think that Mrs. Graham has been at all overlooked or written out of the history of this period in the 70s that most people think of, for instance, All the President's Men and Watergate?
Well, I think if there is any way that she has, now she hasn't. I mean, I think a big goal for us in making this film was getting her voice in the world, getting people to know who she was. It was, the first time I picked up her book, I sort of vaguely knew who she was, but I didn't fully understand. And so I think people hopefully will know who she is now. Yeah.
Do you expect to someday write the story of 2017 at the Washington Post?
I need some distance before I can answer that question.
Okay, yeah. Well, we'll ask you again in 30 years.
Yeah, there you go.
And what was it like to receive this fresh script from a new writer and to work it into what it is now?
I had a lot of trepidation at first going back into the journalism well. I've worked with Marty Baron before, and that was a lot of fun. But I read Liz's script and I was just blown away, both by the writing and by the journey. The story of Kay Graham, incredibly compelling narrative, and one that I think is timely in any number of ways. What was fantastic was working with Liz and getting to talk with members of the Graham family. Ev Small, who was a researcher for Kay when she was writing personal history, Liz Hilton, Sally Quinn. The input we got from all fronts, Len Downey, who took over at the Post from Ben Bradley, the input we got from all fronts was just fantastic. And, I love a good research piece, especially when there's a great story at the heart of it. And Liz had very clearly showed what that story was. And so it was just fun working with her to help get it off the ground.
Do you think that journalists in real life are like journalists in movies?
I hope so. I think so. I hope journalists in movies are like how journalists are in real life.
I hope that too. Thank you very much for speaking with us. It's so nice to meet you both.
Thank you so much.
We've got Steven Spielberg here, director of the movie.
We're so close to, we're 1 degree of separation from Steven Spielberg.
We didn't make the movie for that reason. We made the movie to really celebrate the legacy and story of Catherine Graham and Ben Bradley in 1971 for Washington Post. You can't help but, you can't avoid the amazing historic parallels between 1971 and 2017. Just moving 1 to 7 around was kind of ironic.
Mr. Spielberg, we are here from the Washington Post. We're really live. We have that technology. We're as surprised as you are about it. So tell us, first of all, Mr. Spielberg, why did this movie have to be made so quickly?
Well, look, I made the movie very quickly because, number one, the timelessness of the story is Catherine Graham and Ben Bradley. That's a timeless story, and that's a story that if it hadn't been told this year, it could have been told next year or the year after that. But the whole thing about the journalism kind of under fire and the media being minimalized or downright lied about, the whole new horrible, label of fake news and alternative facts. We just felt that this film was going to speak to a very, very large segment of not just American society, but the world in being able to defend those who are defending our First Amendment rights, which is the press.
So this movie was written before the 2016 election. Do you think you would have directed it differently had Hillary Clinton won the presidency?
No, I would. If Hillary Clinton been the president, I would have directed it the same way. I would. It's a very important story, but I mean in terms of Catherine Graham's message, a woman trying to find her voice in 1971, kind of being shut out in a sea of black suits being worn by men, and the fact that she, even though she was publisher of the Washington Post, how she. A man in her own boardroom would look right through her to the other board member sitting on her other side. And that just says a lot about today. And of course, it was much more prevalent then, too.
Yeah, I have to say that's probably an experience that many women still encounter day to day, and that movies like this help to learn more about. We actually printed out for you the front page of the Washington Post on your birthday. December 18th, blah, 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 blah.
What was happening?
Well, the thing is that, well, let's show it to our cameras a little. All right, well, you tell us. What was happening?
Well, here's the most important thing that was happening that day. Roofs of swanky apartment house near zoo is host to a flock of buzzards. On my birthday in 1946. There we go, right
Some could say it was a symbolic moment that a flock of buzzards was coming into the world somewhere else also.
Yeah, well, all I know is that buzzards both mean, life and the end of life. So
this has got very profound, I have to say.
Too much symbolism here. Let me find another headline.
Mr. Spielberg, can I ask you why I look at the headlines?
Soviets delays vote on atom control plan. This was kind of a racy news day.
Oh yeah, it would have to be.
What will save newspapers and journalism?
I talked to Tom and Meryl, and I talked to journalism students at about 10 universities and colleges this week. And when I saw their faces and their enthusiasm and their love of what they're training themselves to do, I saw, the fact that journalism is never going away. Whether you want to call each other the fourth estate, or you want to basically call each other the heroes, as I like to call you, the heroes of, the foundations of truth in this country, and the seekers of that, and the disseminators of that. However you want to say, this young group of students, I looked into their faces, and Tom Merrill and I had the same reaction. There's our future. It's not going anywhere.
Thank you so much for talking with us.
Thank you so much.
Steven Spielberg, obviously the director of the movie.
Living legend, Steven Spielberg.
Tom Hanks is right next door to us.
Tom Hanks is next to us, so we're feeling overwhelmed.
The shot over there.
Let's take a look at.
He's a little out of our
the handsome Tom Hanks
view range, but trust us, he's right around the corner, folks.
Oh, here we have Alison Brie. I would love to talk to Alison Brie. Hello, we are the Washington Post.
Yes,
you can see.
Wow, it's an honor.
What is your opinion about the Washington Post?
Groundbreaking. Always, the cornerstone of journalistic integrity.
So you play Lally Graham, right? Who is the daughter of Katharine Graham, yes, a.k.a. Meryl Streep. What can you tell us about Lally Graham's role during the release of the Pentagon Papers?
Well, as we see her in this movie, Lally was a bit of a feminist, which, and still is, I think. And during this time, Kay Graham was really struggling, I think, with finding how she wielded her power as the publisher and really finding her place in that world and embracing herself as a feminist icon. It's sort of, she didn't really have an awareness of it at all. And I think Lally was really there to kind of challenge her mother a little bit. And so we see some of that in the film, her sort of giving it back to her mother, challenging her close relationships with past presidents and how she would be able to maintain journalistic integrity, while having those relationships. And at the same time, though, she is a supportive sounding board for her mother. They both had just been through a really horrific event, losing their father and husband respectively. And so they're very much connected in terms of that, and I think that, as we see in the film, Lally is just there as a source of support for her mother in this difficult time.
Did you get to meet with Lally Graham while you're preparing for this role?
I couldn't meet her while preparing, so I did get to meet her on my last day of filming, and it was really fun. She came into the hair and makeup trailer, and they had pictures up on the walls of all of the actors in the film and the side-by-side with the real people, the real-life people they were playing. And Lally was looking up on the wall and going through all of them and just giving me the tips on, oh, that guy looks just like him, that's perfect. Oh, he didn't look like that at all. Oh, he's much more attractive.
And did she think that you look like her?
She thought I was very attractive, and I took the compliment. She was happy I was playing her. So
she didn't say, but not as attractive as me.
She didn't. But, she's a looker for sure.
Very well-raised lady.
Yes.
Anne's also a reporter in her own right.
Yes, absolutely. I read some of her work in preparing for the role.
Yeah, she's interviewed heads of state all over the world, hasn't she?
Yeah, definitely. An amazing international journalist. I read some of her work, and I also watched interviews that she had given to help prepare, so that was really helpful.
Thank you so much for talking to us, Alison Brie.
Thank you.
whose mission is to go deep, find the truth, get it correct, and put it on the record. There's no substitute for that. Everything else is conspiracy theories and lies and falsehoods. Everything else is marketing as opposed to the truth. I think when you look at this, you realize you can't. You're not betting on America if you're dismissing everything as under that rubric. You can't believe everything you read. There's a lot of stuff you must believe because it's true. Thanks. Live stream.
Hello.
Who's this guy?
Haven't been on the Washington Post enough today. Did you talk to Marty Barron?
Well, we haven't seen it yet. We're going to get to see that soon. So, yes.
We actually couldn't get a hold of Marty Barron because he's too popular.
Is this not fabulous? Yes. This is her original Michelle Ciccone, our boss.
We have a producer with a newspaper-themed dress.
So we're obviously with Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson. So great to see you both.
See you.
Nice to see you. Hi, live stream people.
So we have an exciting thing. We have we're Facebook Live. We're live everywhere. Everywhere there's internet.
Great.
Oh, this is my birthday.
It's your birthday.
This is the day I was born.
Oh, I love that.
Look at that. This is when it was the Washington Post Times Herald.
That's how you know it was a long time ago.
Sending plea on aid. Reds betray revolt fears in Germany. Congress begins last 2 weeks. Several thorny issues are pending. Mr. Delightful, born in Concord, California. Look at that. Says so right there. Mr. Delightful. That was me.
Can we keep this?
Yeah, go on. Have it. That's all yours. It cost us nothing.
Could you get me a copy of the Washington Star from July 9th, 1950?
How dare you?
I know. It doesn't exist anymore, guys. You won. You won.
Yes.
We're still proud of that.
Will you tell us, so you met with Ben Bradley before he died. What about him did you pick up on in your performance?
He was a very interested man. There was no such thing as a casual conversation. I had cocktails, we had dinner with him, I met him a number of times.
Incredibly warm.
And he wanted to get into the meat of whatever the subject. It didn't have to be a heavy subject, but he wanted to have a scintillating conversation. And he asked the kind of questions that prompted it, and he had stories that got it up in the air as well. He was a marvelous, fascinating, very, very interested man, passionate about everything.
Can I ask you why it seems like all journalists, and especially editors in movies, are constantly putting their feet up on desks?
That's a good question.
I know why that is. It's a position of power. I saw Amy Cuddy do a talk on this, and it's just interesting that men, they will do that.
Wow, I'm so impressed.
Wow. Put their legs on a desk.
I hope you get paid a ton.
And women don't do that.
Do you think women should do that?
I'm going to start.
Yes, absolutely. I think all women should do it. I think it would throw everybody off, and it would be an amazing thing.
I'll tell you why.
Why?
My feet hurt.
Tom, can I ask you if you have any advice for, we're hearing so much in this Me Too moment about advice for women, young women going into different industries that are being racked by scandals right now. What advice do you have for young men about how they can go about, as young journalists and young actors, for instance, to make a change after this Me Too moment?
Well, it's a matter of adhering to a code of ethics. You have to understand of a complete gender equality. It's a meritocracy that has nothing to do with gender. I think the best thing that could happen for any young man entering any workplace is to work for a strong, fair, demanding taskmaster, taskmistress of a female boss. When you were, and I'm lucky I had that. I had that with Penny Marshall and Nora Ephron and A.B. Pascal and Stacey Snider. I worked for a lot of women who took no slack from me and expected the absolute best.
I also think, though, we have two millennials, if you want to call them that, and I think there has already been a shift because those kids grew up understanding equality, and whether it was gender equality or sexual equality, and I think that generation is already very present and very aware, and I think it's going to be moving forward. They're going to find it easier to have that kind of attitude going forward.
Thank you so much for talking to us. I want to also wish you a very belated Thanksgiving.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely nailed that, frankly. In fact, members of our team recently celebrated Thanksgiving. It's where you have Thanksgiving, except it's Thanksgiving.
Hi, Will Flitzer, Washington Post. We are live at WashingtonPost.com. You know that lady. She's getting a lot of notice.
Our producer's so much more popular than we are.
Yes, no doubt. Talking about our executive editor, Michelle Ciccone.
Was this live?
We are live. We're dueling microphones. Okay, so you're going to check out the movie tonight.
I can't wait to see it. I love movies. Love movies about journalism.
Why?
Because I'm a journalist. I love movies.
Why does the rest of the public love these movies about journalism? Who aren't journalists?
If they're well done, I'm sure this one is. It's a great movie. It's exciting. And this is based on a true story, too. So, look, I go back to All the President's Men. That was a pretty good film, too. So I'm just excited and looking forward to it. I'm a news junkie. I've always been a news junkie.
We can't tell.
Ever since I was a little boy growing up in beautiful Buffalo, New York. And I feel blessed all these years later. I can make a living being a news junkie.
Did All the President's Men inspire you in any particular way when you were?
It certainly did. That whole Watergate, adventure. And whenever I see Bob Woodward or Carl Bernstein, I tell them about that. And I recently saw the HBO documentary on Ben Bradley, and I saw it with Woodward and Bernstein, and it was an exciting. It was just great to see it.
Daniel Ellsberg is here tonight, the actual leaker of the Pentagon Papers, the whistleblower, if you will, in the Pentagon Papers, who gave those papers to the press. What does that role say about government workers, about people who see things that they think need to be stopped or changed?
It's still going on. We still get that kind of information from people who have they're committed to doing something. They want to do something, and they go through extraordinary lengths to try to get the information out. I'm really anxious to see how they portray him in this film, and I know it's going to be exciting.
Thank you so much for talking with us.
Thanks so much.
Enjoy the night.
You guys have no idea at home how much more popular our producer is than we are. And Michelle Giacone, at Giacone on Twitter, the real star of the show. She's dying right now. So who else have we got? By the way, if you're just tuning in late.
Sarah Pauli's right there.
Sarah Pauli's there. Paulson.
Excuse me. Thank you. I'm thinking
I assumed I was wrong.
I've got media on my mind.
No, we're really overwhelmed. We just talked to Tom Hanks, so how are you supposed to be chill after that? We're also waiting for Meryl Streep still. She might be nearby. Let's have a look.
Yep, she's entered the.
You know what? I can't see her, but I can feel it just got warmer in this room, and so I assume that's a Meryl Streep.
So the post-movie premiere tonight, obviously here in Washington, D.C. at the Newseum. And it will be out for a wider release later this month.
I think the wider release, is in January, but the limited release is in December, in time for awards nominations.
I'm so glad I have our pop culture correspondent Hannah Jill here who can explain to me things like movie releases.
And I'm so glad to have Libby Casey, a politics and accountability reporter, who has been speaking to all of the senators, newspapermen and women, and so on. I think we have Sarah Paulson we're going to get to talk to in a moment, perhaps, who plays Tom Hanks' wife. Not Tom Hanks' wife, Ben Bradley's wife. Important distinction here. Let's see. Hello, this is Sarah Paulson.
Washington Post.
A dual
so nice to see you.
I know, we do things.
You do
It's
things
the buddy
we
system.
do things.
It's the buddy system.
The Washington Post. We do things. That could be the
Allegedly.
I mean, Washington Post. We do
things.
Why would you want any other tagline? I don't know.
So you play Ben Bradley's wife in this movie, correct?
Second wife.
Second wife.
His only wife in this particular movie.
In this particular movie that we know of. And tell us about the relationship that you portray in that film. It's a really difficult one, isn't it?
Well, it's complicated. It was maybe a little more complicated when I first read the script than it ended up being by the time we were all done. Tony and Ben were about 2 years shy of divorcing at this particular point in their marriage. They'd been together for a long time. They had some children. They had danced on tabletops in Paris at the beginning of their love story. But it was certainly not that particular dynamic at this time. And he certainly had his mind in a different game and for the good of the country. And it wasn't really a self-serving kind. It's not that he didn't reap the benefits of being so extraordinary at his job, but I think the people that really won were the citizens of the United States, and I think that was really his goal. And so for Tony, I think it was a noble enough cause for her to sit to the side and offer people some sandwiches.
And
I used to go around making jokes, being like, Sammy? Anybody want a Sammy?
Honestly, it would happen right now.
Yeah. Sammy?
We'll take one.
Washington Post.
And we've been talking to a few people about what it is. What is it going to be like this awards season? Is it going to be a different awards season because of the Weinstein fallout, because of the Me Too movement? What do you think it's going to be like?
I have no idea. I think what you will probably see are a lot of women
in solidarity, and not just for each other, but for women everywhere, really. And for every giant leap made in Hollywood, you can only hope that the real place that the traction happens is in people are waving. Hi, I got distracted. She's got sparkly lights on. I can't possibly explain. But you know, for every woman in Hollywood that's had this experience, there, and we obviously are, if you want to use the term, lucky enough to have a giant voice. Hi. They like me. They like me. How are you? Meryl Streep's here too, but it's also me. Also me. You know, for every woman that works in a small town diner, for every woman who works on a factory line, for every woman who's a school teacher, who maybe do not have the recourse and the opportunity, the resources to get, you know, this kind of help with other women behind them. And I'm not being articulate, but I hope that I hope that all of the forward motion that's happening in our industry has a greater impact on people who need it terribly.
What would your advice be to young women who want to become actors, maybe, but might be terrified because of what they learned?
I think if anything, now they might feel rather empowered by the way we've all, you know, there's this great misrepresentation of women in general, that we are all against each other. And I experienced this when we were doing Ocean's 8. There was a lot of expectation that no one would ever come out of the trailer in time, and there'd be a lot of bickering, and who wanted this green lip liner versus the, you know what I mean? Green lip liner, you know what I mean? Eyeliner. There was this automatic assumption that there was going to be infighting, and it was the most supportive, empowering, and that was all of our expectation, but somehow I don't think that's always what's expected when you put a group of women together, and I think there's been a real reordering of that idea in the public opinion and minds, and maybe how women feel themselves about it.
Are you ready for more roles for women in 2018?
God, I'm ready for more roles for me. I'm ready to do
You heard it here.
Anytime you want to pass on the highway. Looking for work.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Sarah Paulson, who you may remember from the incredible HBO series about O.J. Simpson trial. She played Marcia Clark, the attorney, and we're having a look around to see who else is around. I've gotten out of the shot for your benefit.
So we're just watching the end of the red carpet here at the premiere of The Post at the Museum in Washington, D.C. If you want to check any of this stream out later, it will be archived. You can check it out on Facebook and YouTube. We're obviously also broadcasting right now, WashingtonPost.com.
So we've heard a lot tonight about the importance of this movie.
You just saw me giving the rap sign. You caught how the sausage
You know what?
is
This
made
is
here.
the thrill of
We're
live
thinking
television.
We're thinking we're going to wrap. The celebrities, the stars of the movie have gone inside at this point. Obviously, they'll be watching the film. And for many people, this is their first glimpse of seeing the film put together. Everyone from Daniel Ellsberg, who's a character, to people like Wolf Blitzer, who we saw, who are our guests tonight, and then the people who are stars of the movie. So thank you for joining us.
Thank
here
you
on
so
the red
much.
carpet. I'm Libby Casey.
I'm Hannah Jewell, pop culture host.
And we're going to wrap it here. We're going to do the official sign of wrapping it.
Wrap
we're
it
going to wrap
up.
it here. Thanks so much to our team.
Thank you.